Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar on AI pilots to AI outcomes. And with me today is our CEO, Brian Smith, and our Chief Innovation Officer, Anthony Jackman. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us. Fantastic.
I think we have heard a lot about our improvements and our increases in capabilities with AI over the last month. Brian, I think we've seen also a lot of the parallels between what we saw over the last 15 years with cloud and AI. So how are we applying the lessons from that cloud-first era over to AI strategy?
Yeah, there's a lot of different parallels, and some of the different pieces in there. You had a trend where people went cloud first, and when they said they went cloud first, really that was picking a single platform, and I'm going to try to take everything to that platform. And in AI, that's really risky right now because the technology is evolving so fast that it's hard to determine which individual technology stack is going to be the winner multiple years from now, or is one going to do everything? Because that's really what you learned from the cloud perspective. You needed a hybrid environment to get a full cloud operating model. But then there's the other side of it that really goes back to virtualization, not just cloud. Why did people do virtualization? Was to get better use of the resources, better use of capital. And you see a lot of companies go out and buy a huge stack of hardware, and then it's sitting idle for a large portion of the time.
How much hardware are we talking? Like cost-wise, what have they spent so far?
Yeah, I recently ran into a CIO that said that he was very proud that he had spent about $4 million on their first AI hardware deployment. Not a huge deployment for their own individual company, but when we had a conversation about timeline, when things were going to be coming online, they didn't have a great defined project and what the return was going to be. They just knew that they needed to have AI based on what they were being asked for from their overall leadership. So it was their environment to test, learn, and they had confidence that they would get value over time, but it was pretty elongated window.
That sounds exactly like what we've heard from various cloud stories over the last 15 years. We went out to AWS. Why? Because we thought we had to. So Anthony, as we kind of look at that platform-specific strategy, how do we, what percentage of enterprises actually need these types of do-it-yourself, cutting-edge solutions versus something that's more proven and built out as a true solution?
It's a difficult question to answer. The do-it-yourself cutting-edge solutions is really if you have a team of people that are focused on AI, that follow the research, and they are doing large specific projects, largely in software development or developing entire software engineering projects. Many others can benefit from tools that are in the industry because they want to get the knowledge out of their existing documents. Maybe they care about security or control. I would argue that everybody should care about security or control. But there's a lot of point solutions in the market, and there's not a lot that can map to an enterprise's specific needs and carry them from the crawl, walk, run.
And I think it's that real, trying to run before you can walk. You're just going to fall on your face. And I think, Brian, this is where we see a lot of those solutions, those individual point solutions, people trying to get further than they are. So how do we go from something like generative AI and move into things like agentic AI that we've talked a lot about over the last month, some of our things that we're doing with our agentic workflow engine? What do we see as that sort of shift, and how do we see our curated approach playing into that?
Yeah, I think that you take Anthony's crawl, walk, run, and we have a strategy that we've really developed to look at how you go from that approach of initial chat, maybe low touch pieces, to a very complex agentic, and it's more of a stabilize, optimize, modernize. And we talk about that. It creates a good conversation of where are you today, because people are going to be at different places in their overall evolution. And that stabilize is how you get your arms around the AI sprawl that is happening. All these different point solutions that you're paying for multiple users, multiple times. You don't have common security across those. It's amazing when I talk to other CEOs, CIOs, and say, just go back and do two things of research in your company. Ask your technical team to look through the firewall logs and how many people are looking at these like 10 sites, and you look at, things like ChatGPT and Claude and some of the most popular, but then talk to your finance team and have them look at the expense reports for the same companies and vendors. And, many of these companies are already spending thousands of dollars a month on things that people have just bought on their own and have expensed. So if you can help with the stabilizing, get your arms around and eliminate that sprawl, and you're giving them something that is actually approved by the business, that you have confidence in the security, then you think of that optimize of how do you connect to the data and actually increase the value of those tools and that they're doing through that interface through like a chat piece. But then the modernize is really where you start thinking about how you evolve the business. And the agentic side, I often refer to as essentially virtual employees or digital employees, and how you're incorporating them into the business to help accelerate what you can do, get an execution of best practice at scale. So you really have to look at all the different pieces of the business, and it's hard to get to the end if you don't have that solid foundation to start from.
Yeah, it's that if you're not going to, you can't worry about the countertops until you've built the foundation of the house.
Right.
And I think a lot of this is that sort of getting things into place. There was a study, Layer X is a browser security platform. They saw 92% of traffic to AI websites just went to ChatGPT. So it is a huge amount of traffic going that way. Is your organization using a paid account? Are your users using paid accounts? The answer is probably not. So how do we sort of fit into that? And Anthony, at this, we kind of talked through those point solutions. Where does our overall solution differ from that in terms of not just having the technology?
So I want to touch on something Brian said in terms of stabilize. To me, the most important thing is wrapping your arms around it in terms of security, observability, and control. Because let's say you have that really forward-thinking employee that builds an agent, and on the first day he demos it, he can demonstrate that it saves hundreds of hours a month of engineering time. Is the business going to release it to production? Not if they don't understand the security of it. If they don't know, is it properly tracking who's using it, what they're using it with, what documents it's pulling, and where that information is being sent to, they're not even going to use it. So we started with solving those problems. And then something that's been really important to us is carrying that foundation forward into everything else that we build. So step one is get your arms around it and give employees something to replace the shadow AI tools that they've been using. I have a chatbot that I'm interacting with. That's kind of step one. Step two, tie it to some of your company's existing information, but maintaining your existing security posture. So if an employee can't access a document today through a file share, they can't access it tomorrow through AI, so that you have that control. And then expanding that forward to maybe you have documented processes that you want to optimize with AI. So you know what the process is, but at some point an employee has to type something out. There's a human element to it. We can insert AI into that equation to start knocking off known processes for you. And then that last step is agents, which are called agents because they have agency and they make decisions about how to operate. If you don't follow that path, it's very difficult to see how the average company is going to choose to put an agent into production.
So just to clarify on that, you have the difference between a workflow and an agent. A workflow being something where I know that I do step A, then step B, then step C, and it's very predictable. But if I have to have some sort of decision point in the middle, that's not something that a workflow would do. That would be something like an agent?
Generally speaking, yes, right? Agents are differentiated in that they are making decisions about what to do, not just what language to insert, right? So you might have a workflow, it's 5 steps. Step 3 is to write an email with the appropriate tone, sourced with the appropriate data based on who you're sending it to. That's kind of the step 1 for a workflow. The next step is, depending on the customer or the individual situation, you may need to make different decisions and you're not going to follow the same 5 steps. That's when agents come into play.
Just going back to your question as far as kind of what's different, I think you've highlighted a number of the different pieces in your example there. That one, it's a platform inside of Expedient that actually addresses the chat side, the data connection side, all the way to the agent side. So you're not working with 5 or 6 different vendors to put it together. But I think the bigger piece of really is the future-proofing side. Because if you think back to what is an Expedient, what is our core value for 15, 20 years, it's really been the curation of technology together, so that we're helping simplify the initial implementation and the day two operation so clients focus on their outcomes. And I think the value of that right now is higher than it's ever been, because that curation of technology and that abstraction layer really helps segment so that you can solve for today using today's AI technology, but we're this middle layer that as technology components really change, it's how those connect together. So yeah, you've talked about the container side and the benefits of containers in the compute side. Draw some parallels to that when you think of the AI control platform.
So your concept that it's curated, well, let's look at my team. My team's job is to be the forward thinkers that are aware of everything that's out there to make the correct decisions for Expedient and then to carry that forward to services for our customers. There are so many options that it's hard to even know what to do. So we've specifically chosen components of our stack that we know can be carried forward and expanded upon without changing the core. Everything has to correlate back to the core of it, to your point about using the resources that you have to their highest potential, the most that they could be used. But also we've chosen components that we believe that our average customer can understand quickly and get value out of while maintaining visibility and control. That's very central to what we're doing. Yes, we are there as your service partner that's going to help you identify use cases, that we are going to get them off the ground for you, and we're going to help you to optimize them. But many of our customers also like to run a little bit on their own, and we've chosen a platform specifically that enable them to do that.
So just condensing that down, some of the biggest differentiators are co-managed, for sure, in there. And then it's that optionality that you can flex and change things along the way without having to change the underlying application. But even more so, the people, the know-how that we're bringing, so that it's not just, here's technology, go use it, that our engineers and our teams, our outcomes team is helping build those components to get people all the way to the end so they're actually consuming it.
And that, I think, is the biggest difference between generic technology provider and a solution provider, right? We're a service provider. We provide a service. And I think a lot of this comes back to, there's not just Anthony's team going out and finding the coolest and best technology and making that into a service. There's hundreds of engineers from delivery and operations and our facilities teams making sure that it runs all the time, and that when somebody says, hey, this is what I want to get to, we're helping you get there and make sure that it stays at that outcome that you want and not transitioning to a poorer outcome.
I think it's important to call out that before we took this to release for our clients, we are using it in production ourselves to optimize our business. So our confidence level of the business value that it can deliver is quite high.
So when it comes to that, talk about one of the examples that we've used agentic AI for, because I think for us as a service provider, it feels very unique to us in our space, but I feel like overall there's a bigger opportunity for organizations because they probably have similar problems.
Sure. I mean, this one is specific to us, but you can see how it is very parallel to a problem our customers may have. We obviously are a very large provider of connectivity services along with our cloud. So we get notifications from all of our vendors whenever there may be a challenge with a circuit, something that's bringing bandwidth into our buildings. Based on who the vendor is, what customers we know could potentially ride that loop, there's a lot of decision points that have to be made in terms of how we're going to deal with that, for servicing it, for communicating with our partner, and then for communicating out to our clients if there is any risk. Not that they're actually going to see downtime, but that there's, reduced reliability potentially.
Somebody's working on a cable, there may be a disconnect of that cable at some point.
Right. We tried to map it out into an exact process. We found out you kind of can't. There's humans in the middle that have to make decisions along the way. So there's pieces of it that are workflow. You're going to go from A to B to C, but then you have to make a decision about what to do. And we found that, within a couple of days, we could tune an agent to be able to do that. And the important thing to call out is was not one of our leading AI people that was able to build that agent. It was one of the people that works within that existing process that in natural language told it how it should behave. It calls out to a number of tools to gather data, to send emails, to send notifications. And we've reduced our labor effort massively.
And I think not just in the reducing the labor effort, but also being more communicative with our client base, telling them, hey, we know that this is going to happen. We got a notification from our vendor. You should be aware of these things and setting those expectations properly, because in the past, we would know that those things were happening and we would try our best to notify people. But when you have to figure out exactly what circuit is touching which client, that's really hard to do and it takes a lot of time. And so it can sometimes fall by the wayside. So I think that's also a testament to wanting to improve the service. So, Brian, you talk to a lot of CIOs and CEOs, and I'm sure they all have an AI initiative of some kind, right? So we've seen in the past, say, companies say, hey, we're in the cloud, but that just meant they were running like 3 VMs in some place and that qualified as running in the cloud, but they weren't actually doing anything with those things. And it's almost like cloud deployment theater, right? When you're talking to a CIO or a CEO, what are the sort of indicators that tell you that they're serious about this? They have a real initiative and they're really executing on it versus just saying, we rolled out Copilot to 30 users and we called it an AI initiative.
Yeah, it's a challenging thing because nobody wants to feel like they're left behind. So, some stats that I actually read earlier today that 46% of companies said that they have agentic AI fully rolled out in their business.
Sure.
And I was like, wow. And then the next question was, how many agents do you have active? And the over 80% were 1 to 5. And that, like, I could have 1 to 5 just applying to me in our business.
You do that.
And so I think that right now, people want to understand AI. They want to see, where it fits for them. But most people just don't know really how to start. And you talked about the service provider side. A lot of the value that I think we bring to bear is I talk about the different agents being very universal. Anthony talked about one that's a little more specific to us, but I break up agents by function of business to begin with. So what could you use in a revenue team? What could you use in an accounting team? What could you use in a client services team? And having multiple deployments over and over and over for people allows us to be much more prescriptive. And it's very similar to when we talk about other services we do, like disaster recovery. A company has an environment that they need to replicate to a second site, and they need to be able to press a button and it just works. Every single company's environment looks different that we're starting from, but they get to the same outcome. And the same thing holds very true when it comes to the agentic AI and getting those rolled out. So I think that a lot of people see the value, they have the interest, and they have some people that are curious. The next thing is they really have to allocate some budget and cycles and determining what's the outcome they want to try to get to. And, I think getting into it slowly so that you can show value and get confidence to go to the next step is what's really important versus the person that spends the $4 million in hardware without kind of all the other things checked. I think it's going to be a much harder business case to get their next investment versus somebody that's spending a few $1,000s a month and they're getting value and outcomes in 30 or 60 days.
Yeah, and we spent this amount of money. Okay, we spent all that money. What are we getting out of it? Is the question they get back.
Yeah, and that is one of the biggest things that we made. So the whole AI platform we originally made for ourselves and for our own benefit. And then based on demand, we actually productized it for others. And that was one of the things that we had made for ourselves was that accountability dashboard. So that you can see agent by agent by agent, what is the output that it's providing, how does that relate to the cost for us to do that same thing previously, both from a time to do it, but also the client experience side, so that we can see exactly what that looks like and then provide that same type of accountability to the client so that they can have that type of dashboard and understand the true value of the deployment that they have in place.
And I think some of that accountability also comes back to financial accountability. So are there obviously the cost that everybody thinks about is, oh, Copilot costs X dollars per user, ChatGPT costs X dollars per user. But what are the other like sort of hidden costs that organizations aren't necessarily paying attention to when they're looking towards their AI initiatives and then moving into agentic?
There's a lot there. So, one, back to the shadow AI and even the things that people are just expensing, you have the cost of people not of just doing their own thing. You have the opportunity cost of your competitor outpaces you. You have the cost from a risk perspective that the wrong information is put out and is similar to a data breach. You have the cost of somebody deploying agents incorrectly and opening up security holes and essentially getting your entire system attacked, hacked, whatever you want to think about it. So there's lots of costs from those perspectives. But then there's also just the hard dollar cost, the picking the wrong model for executing a task. And you may be somebody that doesn't understand the world as much related to AI-specific models and different options, and they could be spending 20x what they have to. So having a service provider help guide you through that, or even help you understand when you should switch from a public model to running a private model internally for different portions of the work so you can minimize cost. A lot of times the service provider can help really more than pay for itself, just in cost savings from that, the cost you would have deployed and spent otherwise.
And Anthony, in terms of those costs, we've seen clients encounter some fairly significant surprises, especially at scale. And you work with a lot of our vendors and working with a lot of organizations where they're trying to really optimize that down. Are there any sort of like huge cost surprises that you've seen from talking with clients? And how does our platform really help handle that at scale?
I have seen it with clients not using our platform yet that have just gone out on their own and done things. To Brian's point about choosing the wrong model, if you give a particularly large task to the wrong model on an open API key, you can rack up hundreds to thousands of dollars in less than an hour if you're not careful about what you're doing. Our platform has some guardrails on it in that we can actually gate the amount of spend that any client could do. Like the rest of our services, we aim for predictability. We know what our average client is utilizing. We do everything at a resource pool level, not per user. So one heavy user doesn't increase the bill for the entire client because it's resource pool. But we can put guardrails on it so they can't exceed it. And then if you look towards like our agent platform, that's when these things start running on their own and it could get dangerous. Our agent platform includes the ability to evaluate the performance of a model against, or of an agent against different models. So you can see that it's giving you the outcome that you expect in terms of what it's doing while reducing your costs. And then, like Brian said, we have out-of-the-box dashboards that show you when that agent is running, how much it's consuming, and the direct dollar amount of what that agent is costing you. So you can correlate it directly back to business value. Because that's really what we're trying to get to is cost of agent doing the thing is significantly less than cost of you doing it before the agent was there.
And just tying to that, there's one of the stats I think I'm most proud of in the company as a whole, getting all choked up about it, is that we have a 99% client retention rate. And the reason for that is providing value all along the way. And as their business changes, that they can shift and adjust as well. So when we started down the value side of AI, it was very much the same, that we give an option where if you're doing a small implementation, you could pay per user. But pretty quickly, when you get out of that beta, that test type of area, we offer a flat rate option. So you don't have a per user fee. You can just enable everybody in your business. And then it aligns to consumption. So as you use it more, as you get more value out of it, it has costs that go with it. But you're not making the bet on the front end of what the value you're going to receive. It's more results driven. So I think that's important when you're thinking of the cost side. How do you de-risk the overall cost? And that's from, you're not spending millions in hardware upfront. You're picking the right different models. You're not having a per user fee when you have 5,000 employees. So there's different decisions you can make, and often it's options that clients didn't realize existed.
And I think that plays into the agentic flows, because when we start talking about agents, there's no there's guardrails that we put into place, but the agents are doing things consistently. They're doing things constantly. It's not, hey, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., we see a whole bunch of usage, and then off hours, there's not a ton. The agents are also running off hours as well. So I think some of this is also helping to balance amount of usage and cost against expected usage from things like agents. I actually saw a very silly story of somebody who was building out some agents. They wanted to, just as a test, set a reminder to get milk the next day. They ended up blowing through $20 on an OpenAI key because the thing was constantly checking to see what time it was and was it daytime yet, so it could actually post the reminder.
I read the exact article. It was using a very expensive frontier model to check what time of day it was.
Right. And this is the sort of thing that we see of helping to provide those guardrails and get to the outcome. You don't need Opus 4.5 to tell you what time of day it is. In fact, it's probably not going to be very good at it. But something like, hey, I'm handing you, this is the current date and current time. GPT-5 Nano, is it daytime, yes or no? It's probably going to give you an answer at a much lower cost. So some of this is also just our knowledge of how to do this the right way versus, hey, here's the technology and how to go do that.
Yeah, in this area, I think the expertise, especially with the maturity of AI in the market as a whole, the value is on the knowledge more than even the technology right now.
And I think that plays into our platform. And Brian, you mentioned earlier containers, and Anthony, I'll kind of come back to you on that. It's in terms of something like containers, I can move my containers from Docker to Kubernetes to Azure to AWS. It doesn't matter as long as my container builds and my images can be built on top of those things. That was a huge abstraction layer for developers. So for AI, with our platform, adding in that abstraction layer, what is that helping to provide for maybe application devs or agents and of helping them to avoid a bunch of rework?
The container parallel is probably a good one because there were about 1 million ways to do containerization or to run Kubernetes. And a big piece of the value we are bringing is we have a slightly opinionated way of doing it that guarantees that we can deliver a great level of service. And we've chosen platforms that solve 95% of use cases we run into. If we run into the client that's somehow outside of that, we're just upfront with them that they may need something else, right? But it's rare. We've aimed at the same thing with the AI and agentic services, in that we wanted to build products that could go in with an opinionated view of the world that would solve the bulk of problems in a very cost predictable way.
Yeah, and tied to that is if the different models and things that people are consuming change, that they could switch from an OpenAI model to an Anthropic model to a Google model, and there's no change in their application interaction with the Expedient platform.
Or agent.
Or the agent, so that you can make changes to the underlying technology that's being consumed without actually changing or rewriting any of the agent. And that's the big difference of, why it's like that abstraction layer compared to if you're using a single technology company's entire stack. To move from one to the other, you're actually rewriting the entire agent or your application.
So we've seen this AI sprawl and this tool sprawl turn into 1 million different holes. I need access to this tool. I need access to that tool. And it doesn't seem like any of them are really doing this for a particular outcome. They just want the AI feature from the particular platform or service that they're already using. You've mentioned our outcomes team. What is that bringing to the table in terms of getting people past punching little holes for services to actually getting to a business outcome?
Sure. I think I'd probably split that into 2 different pieces. So one is really the security and the overall experience in the company, because the way that people are often doing AI right now is you have tens, hundreds of different point solutions, and often they're an AI feature from a different software company, and you have to now give it a God level access into your Office 365 or Zoom or whatever it may be, and you're doing it multiple different times for different places, and you don't have a lot of observability. So that's some of the risk on that side. But what's also not happening is your accounting team's making one decision, your marketing team's making another, your sales team's making another, and there's not that overall coordination. So when it comes to the outcomes team, there's a few different components that go with that. So first, we have a group of folks that are doing process mapping to help interview and go through the process and use different tools to identify what is a good agent and what does it look like, what should it be doing to help to map that process Then we have a layer of data engineers. That's how do we connect to the data where it resides today? So you may have some in a SaaS, you may have some inside of Expedient, you could have things on premises. And does it all belong there? Do you need to build pipelines to bring it together? And then finally, there's the workflow engineers that are putting it all together and with the project management over top, so that they're really helping walk you through that entire process. But coming back to Anthony's point earlier, it is co-managed. So we're also teaching you the thought process and the approach. So you don't have to come back and use our outcomes team every time. You can, but we're walking through and teaching that so that you can execute on your own.
And I think that's the biggest difference in terms of, instead of having just, this is the technology that we've brought in, insert tool here, it's, hey, here are the people helping you get to where you want to go, right? You guys remember AAA when they used to do the triptychs?
Absolutely.
They do those digitally now, but they use, like, you get a map and it would say, like, on Route 19 in West Virginia, there's construction, because there was always construction on Route 19. But this was a paper map helping you find that best route that you may not know about because you don't drive that every single day, but they have that information. When we start to see this agentic AI take off, Brian, you've mentioned some of the security risks that come along with that, in terms of this is an autonomous agent that has agency to do things. How do we make sure that it's not putting things at risk? And Anthony, when we're digging into this from a workflow and agent standpoint, how are we helping to maintain the security and compliance that I think enterprises and organizations are expecting?
Step one, we started with our chatbot from a security standpoint, again, back to just access of information. So that's baked into everything from the start. When you start getting to these agents are going to take action on your behalf, very few businesses are comfortable just inserting it into production. So part of what our platform enables you to do, and our team is trained to understand to insert, is human approval that can be put in at step one. So the agent tells you what decision it's made, what information it's going to use, and the action it's going to take. And it can drop that to a human to just click an approve button, right? So you're seeing the real value of what the agent could do. You're already getting accelerated because the agent works 100 times faster than a human. And then you simply review your dashboard of actions that you need to approve. The human can approve it. Once you start batting 1,000 on approvals, that's where the customers get comfortable saying, I can remove that guardrail and let this agent truly be autonomous. So we've considered that up front, because our goal is that our clients actually use the platform and get value out of it, and they get that value quickly without introducing extra risk.
Can you also touch on somewhat the agent replay and the logs capability inside the platform?
Yeah, something that's unique to our platform is that every time an agent runs, there is a log created of it. And I'm not talking about a text log that requires an engineer to decipher. A typical business user can select an agent run, and it will play back visually every step that agent took. It'll show you its thought process. It will show you every time it has reached out to a data source or another tool, if it's made decisions. So end to end and see how it behaved, which not only gives you confidence that it's not quite doing what you expected, it helps you to fix it very quickly.
Ability to say, hey, every time it runs this is not coming back quite as I needed to. Let me change that prompt. Let me update that thing. I think that's some of the other things of knowing how these will work. And we've used them to help find problems inside of our own agents to say, hey, that output is not quite right. I think the human in the middle one is the biggest one for me. Knowing that, hey, I'm going to run this thing, I'm going to let it do its thing, but I still have like the thumbs up, thumbs down to be able to say, this can go out, I need to review this, or I need to take this output and rewrite it so that it doesn't send out something I don't want it to, like, hey, I'm accidentally outputting an entire customer database because it hallucinated something, right? We don't want that.
Right.
I think kind of getting into that sort of future state, we've seen this platform change dramatically over the platform landscape over the last 3 years change dramatically. And obviously, I don't think it's going to be the same thing in 3 years, right? So I guess, Anthony, I'll start with you. What sort of changes do you anticipate coming in this landscape, and how are we building that flexibility into AI control to help take on those additional changes?
I think the first thing I'll call out just generically is that we have an entire team of people at Expedient that does not work operationally, that it is their job to be forward-looking, to understand what's available, and to constantly innovating our platform, understanding what we have today and where we need to take it. That's something that's very expensive and quite honestly not realistic for many customers to do. We're doing that on their behalf from the start. In terms of where the actual technology goes, that's relevant to this conversation. Let's say that I see agents becoming increasingly more aware of the context in which they are working. So if they're working for a particular company, that the system is going to learn more and more of the inherent knowledge of that business, things that don't necessarily exist in documents. And they're not in a structured form, that the more agents you build and the more they work, they will start collecting data that only lives in your employees' heads today and can get even more intelligent about making decisions. That's something that I'm actually working with internally right now. I have some agents that are working to build the collected knowledge of our solution architects to increase their availability to our sales team, right? What if I want an answer from my solution architect, but they're not actually available, and the information I want doesn't necessarily exist in a document? Working on the system that can expose that to our sales team to really get almost like an accelerant of the pace at which our sales team can work, and creating more essays without having more essays.
Yeah, that same question I would, when I think of kind of what's next, I think that certain things that we look at as forward-looking and such that are cutting edge right now, and that could be agents or the retrieval augmented generation, are going to become just table stakes. And then it's really going to be, how do you start to evolve that? And there's going to be a couple pieces. So one, I think the human in the middle and the decision will really decline as competence built. And I think you're going to always have the human in the middle as you get to the next cutting edge thing. You're going to see you build the competence. But for the kind of the base things, we see a lot of the agents happening in the consumption right now, that piece will fall away. And so you'll further accelerate the overall outcome. But then you're also going to have a new human management layer that is going to really start thinking of agents as a digital or virtual employee. And how do you manage that? How are you measuring the efficacy and the cost piece? And the same things you do when you're doing planning and budgeting, from what's it cost to run it, what are the hours of availability, and what's the staffing, what's the scale. All those things are very accurate and map directly to the agent world. And so it's going to take some evolution on the people side on how we manage and run those environments.
Do we see I see a shift in the people being the people in charge of the processes, understanding how things are supposed to work, instead of this is the one document that runs this process and you just go in, you do step 1 through 5. It's, hey, do we still need to have 1 through 5? Hey, we brought in this new client really wants step 4B just for them. How do we handle that? And it turns more into thinking about the overall flow of data, the overall flow of work, instead of just, this is the the agents will just do that. Because humans are still bags of meat, and we are not terribly robotic. We're bad at doing the same thing twice. So being able to say, hey, this is where the human element comes in, because humans are messy. How do we make sure that we understand as humans how to handle that, and then bring that into a true sort of agentic future and bring that all the way forward? I think, Anthony, in terms of just that AI development strategy, what do you see as that next inflection point past agents?
I don't know that I see an inflection point past agents. I see the agents evolving to be more capable and treated almost as if they are employees. And it necessarily changes the management style that you have. The most important thing you can do when managing agents is actually understanding the outcome that you want, right? You don't have to understand every bit of tech or how you might implement something. You have to understand the experience you want to create or the outcome that you want to get from it, and to be able to orchestrate this across agents. So it's effectively like you're managing a team of people that are unopinionated and don't have their own goals. They only have the goals you set for them. That makes it very important that you set the correct goals.
And it's also, as agents become a lot more complex, of interacting with them almost as a coworker, and have a conversation back with an agent to ask for, it has access to lots of data. Say, this is the process. Challenge me on, if you were going to break this or look at ways to accelerate this. How could you improve this by 40%? If I ask for a 60%, what are the risk points of where is this likely going to break? And you can start thinking of it as that coworker that you can interact with all the data that's underlying as well.
And I think since we're now talking about the shift of agents to people and people to agents, let's take it to our live Q&A and hear from the Hello, everyone. We are here for Q&A. Brian, thanks for joining me again. Anthony Jackman is out on assignment right now. We got a number of questions through registration, which we always thank you. And a lot of times we get really great and thoughtful questions. And honestly, this month might be one of our best. There's a lot of really great questions in here. But let's start at the top here. The first question here is, how hard is it to get set up and connected with Expedient AI Control? And Brian, I think this is a pretty easy one.
Yeah, and appreciate all the questions, because we actually had so many, we had to group them together because there's a lot more than what we could handle in a lot of time. So the time to get going is actually one of the big benefits of using a platform. So that when we talk about stabilize, optimize, modernize, the stabilize of getting people access to a secure AI chat, they're getting that really in days or weeks as we integrate with their current authentication methodology. And then very quickly you start connecting to your different data sources, and that's still in that weeks to very few months, depending on the number of different data sources. And then the agentic piece with the modernize, the platform is available very quickly, and it's working with the client to map out their business process and do the implementation.
And a lot of what we're doing with our platform is governance and security. And in the kind of in the next question, we got a few of these. Governance and security remain the primary barriers to adoption. A lot of people are buying the pro tiers of Claude, ChatGPT, et cetera. So when they're using those pro tiers of public AI tools, what are the genuine risks to company data and PII, and how do we provide the guardrails to protect that and keep an enterprise safe?
Yeah, I think there's the traditional way that people are thinking about this is the actual data risk. And so when you're doing the pro tier, there's a couple of pieces. One, you can opt out of the model or that public LLM using your data, but it's not a automatic thing. You have to opt out of it per user. You can't do it overall. And then also certain providers, every time they do an update, it opts you back in, and you have to opt out again and again and again. So there's not surety that things are opted out. So from the Expedient perspective, we're actually interacting with any public LLMs through an API versus through the user interface. And with that, the terms of service are very different, and they never have any rights to retain data. The other aspect from that is actually a huge risk, but people don't think about it as much, is related to vendor lock-in and the speed that different things are changing. And so some of the risk, also when people are doing pro tiers, you have different teams that have picked different technologies, so things are disparate. They're not working in concert with each other. But then as one technology surpasses another, you either end up paying for multiple different things, or you're having to redo work to use the best technology, versus we've really abstracted that as a middle layer, and you have access to multiple different models that you can adjust and select at any time.
I think the other piece there is the governance angle, is when you have a bunch of different tools. This group likes ChatGPT, this one likes Claude, this one likes Gemini. You don't have one single viewpoint. by what our LLM gateway is doing is pulling all of that together. And so I can see the usage across all of the models. I can see all of the prompts and all of the responses and all of the token counts. So I can see who's using the most, who's using it for personal reasons, those sorts of things, where that level of governance is not really possible across the tool sets, even when you pay for the $100 or $200 a month plans from any of these vendors. That's not a thing that's there. So being able to bring that across all the tool sets and let the users and let the end users actually use the tools they want to use versus saying, this is the one you're going to use, like it or not. One of the other things that we're seeing now is this sort of, the what is it, the hype cycle, where we're now hitting that point of like, okay, the AI hype is still pretty high, but now a lot of folks are looking for measurable ROI. This is a thing I know I need to go do. I want to go do this thing, but how do I show back to the business? As we mentioned in the interview, you have customers who are buying $4 million worth of hardware, but they're not really sure what they're going to do with it. So what is the most effective organizational structure, like a center of excellence versus a decentralized approach, to prioritize those high return use cases, specifically in places like heavily regulated industries where it's not exactly the fastest?
Sure. I think that's a really good question, and something that people aren't always thinking far enough out for. So we highly recommend the centralization from the governance side. Being able to have role-based access control and authentication and the observability, all of that very much centralized, so that your business is making decisions from a compliance and security teams of who has access to what data, who has access to what models, and how they're using them. So that is really critical for secure usage. Now, then we would also be a huge proponent of decentralizing the actual use cases and using people that are experts in their lines of business. And that could be having custom models or custom GPTs. People use different words, for essentially having a tailored public model or private model that's interacting with your data for specific teams and use cases. Or when you get into the agentic workflows, also enabling those teams with the tooling and interacting with our outcomes team, because the people that know your business best, know your business process and your client challenges, are the ones that are going to help you really accelerate in getting the most value out of AI quickly.
That even comes around to simple things like the custom GPT is one I like using a lot, because it's not that hard to put together on our platform, but can provide a massive amount of value. We actually used it for HR open enrollment this fall, because there's a lot of questions to go into that. What is the plan? What are the premiums? Explain to me how these features of the plan work. So it helped simplify a lot of the questions that were being asked the HR team, which is generally the same ones over and over again. So it helps to really narrow those sorts of use cases down. But building it and it being simple meant that they didn't have to go to like a lead engineer to put that together. They were able to do that themselves, which was really, really cool. Kind of in that same vein about data, how do you prepare your data for AI? I have years of training material I would like to make searchable. Was one of the extra little bits that somebody threw in there. This is the sort of thing where your data is only as good as the organization that it has. Unstructured data can be read by AI, but kind of how do you see preparing data for AI use?
Yeah, in his specific, or this person's specific question, when they use the word training, it's not training a model. It's that their information they use for training people in their company is the way I interpret that. So, the fastest way that you can get very quick value is when you're curating. So if you, in this example, if you had that training data, you could have that custom GPT or custom model available literally in minutes or hours, and making that accessible using best practice for employees inside just the base chat platform. And that's great for an initial quick hit point in time, but then you're going to want to leverage the data connectors to build rules. And so a simple way you could do that is you could have directories or things that it's watching. So as you are curating and working through your data, that it can automatically pick that up and make that available to the different models. But also that has some scaling limitations. So a lot of the value that we can help provide is helping build the different data pipelines, having so it's chunking the different data correctly and increasing the accuracy
And that's been one of the big points that we've had a high degree of focus on, is how do you change the way you do data ingest and those different pipelines. Because when we first started our first iteration internally, that it was probably a 40% success rate as far as getting the right information out, and that's not something that you could really productize or leverage well. So we went through a lot of different iterations and realized that the value of spending time there, so you could drive that north of 80% with approaching 90% accuracy. And also, one of the ways that we view as a best practice is giving direct links back to the source data, so you can see all the citations of what was used. You can click on it and link to it, so that way you're also building confidence in the answer and then the source information from that.
Yeah, this is like an actual really easy example is Confluence. We use Confluence for documentation purposes. We connected it at the very top layer of Confluence. We have a number of different spaces underneath for various units of the organization, and it trying to find something would occasionally pull, like I would ask a sales question, it would pull it from like a support procedure. And I would ask a question about a support procedure, it would pull some sales documentation. And it's very much like searching for needles in a haystack. It can be really good at that. But when you take the time to bring the connector's view down and be more precise with where you want it to look, but also things like, this is a great opportunity to say, what is the most current documentation we have? What is this? Okay, this is the current version of this operating procedure. I don't need the last 15. I need this one. This is the one I want them to answer questions off of. So leverage this as an opportunity inside the business to do that data curation, to do that cleanup. There's not really a good preparation of like, delete everything in the last 7 years. Like, you don't need to do that. It's find the stuff that actually matters and build off of the use cases, and you'll build out from there as you continue to build out the use cases.
Yeah, and we even provide controls, so agent by agent, or even from a chat interface, model by model. You can set the different things, such as the creativity and temperature and so on, so that how hard fact-based do you want it to be, how creative do you want it to be to fill in the gaps if you're missing information. So those are things that you can dial in, so that certain things you want absolute certainty every time. Others you want it to take creative freedom when writing a marketing article, and you have that control by different team, by different model. And so that's just a very different experience than you get if you are just purchasing like a pro version of it, ChatGPT or something.
And kind of also, what's the best way to adopt AI was something that came up a lot. So let's start there with, what is the best approach to adopting AI and making progress with AI initiatives, especially in heavily regulated industries?
Well, we'll start with just the adoption, then we'll get into the regulated, but that's where that conversation around stabilize, optimize, modernize. A lot of people try to start jumping at the modernize phase, and they've not done the stabilize, which is giving all of your employees a secure AI chat, which means they're going to go get their own. And then the optimize often is connecting to your data as it sits in the different places where it sits. That could be SaaS platforms, that could be storage platforms, and making that accessible. And then some of that optimization is how you get faster response and better quality response all along the way before you get to modernize. So the best practice is, one, giving everybody access, so that you're not enabling shadow AI. And then two is making sure you have the foundation set before you try to get off to the races. In the heavily regulated, the way I'd start there is really at the security layer, and going with people that are your most likely blockers of AI consumption, and asking them to help you identify what are all the things that would stop them from being comfortable using AI, and then working through to show how your solution that you put together really addresses that. So it's like some of the things that we did ourselves. We started with our security and our compliance teams, and said, give me every roadblock and challenge of why we can't do this. And that's actually where we started the entire platform for our own usage. And that's why we have the role-based access control. That's why it integrates with single sign-on. That's how you have all the controls. That's why we have the observability we do. That's why every client environment runs on a different set of containers, so there's no crossover between clients. So that was really important to us, and we see that same piece come up on a regular basis for clients.
And that basically starting with, okay, tell me why you're going to say no. and then work through like, okay, this is a no, this is a no, this is a no, these are the blockers. Starting from there is actually a really interesting way to go about it versus like saying, look at all the value we're getting. Don't you want to say yes? That's a hard thing to do when the value is being outweighed by all of the risk of somebody doing it incorrectly. So working through those things can be hard to do and can sometimes feel incredibly frustrating. But this is also why you will be successful long term when you do that. And when we talk about AI governance, I think a lot of people find it hard. We actually got a lot of questions like this one of what's the deal with AI governance? Does it really need to be so difficult? And I want to thank Jerry Seinfeld for putting in that question because it's a lot of times it feels difficult, but I think it's not necessarily hard. It's that people are going about it the wrong way. Like it's hard to do AI governance when everybody's using 6 different platforms, right? You're trying to connect into all these different places, so you're not getting a centralized view. We made it really easy. And that's because we're bringing all of the prompts and responses through a single point, so we don't have to try to connect to 7 different places and track everybody down.
Yeah, and a lot of the governance, the challenge people is they write an AI use policy, but they don't have any methodology or technology to help enforce it. And that's really what, when you think of just the secure AI gateway, the base platform is all about that security layer. And it is how you enable all those standard governance pieces, because we thought of what are the different controls that are needed for any normal enterprise application, and how do we wrap those controls around your interaction with AI.
And that, I think, is like, it's not called the open AI gateway. It's the secure AI gateway.
Right.
We also see a lot of people come to us and they ask about hosting AI and seeing a lot of the data center news. Pennsylvania just announced more data center funding. We've seen a lot of announcements from federal space, from state and local organizations around, hey, look at all these new data centers that are coming around. With the major hyperscalers now starting to vertically integrate power and infrastructure, this is where we're seeing, hey, we're building this data center that's literally next to a power plant of some kind. Microsoft is restarting 3 Mile Island of all things. With their AI ambitions, are we ready to deliver full stack managed solutions?
I think that's a really good one, and one that we get often. That how is Expedient going to compete against an Anthropic or an OpenAI or Microsoft or whoever? And you need to kind of zoom out a little, and who are we, and where do we fit in the market? And we're a curator. It's the same thing that we're not building storage platforms from the ground up. We're purchasing a storage platform, we're integrating it with a compute platform and a hypervisor and security, and having it work together. On the AI side is very, very much the same. We're curating all the different pieces to work together as one cohesive system for the client. And some of those are going to leverage those public large language models, and they're going to be leveraging those huge platforms. Other things, and why we're different than some of the SaaS platforms that are out there, and that's when we talk about our intelligent infrastructure, is our vertical integration. We have our own data centers, we have our own compute stack, and we have our own AI stack. So we have control over those different components, and we can run and build out private AI environments directly inside the data center that's connected to your storage that's in there, so you have no latency, no data transfer fee, that we can help minimize duplication of costs, because you're paying for security once, you're paying for bandwidth once, you're paying for storage once. And so those are a lot of the things that help differentiate us versus others, because you may have things that you own that you want to co-locate directly adjacent to everything else. You can't go to a hyperscale and co-locate your hardware in the same building that AI runs. And so having those different generations of technology and having it work together in one cohesive system is part of what's very different of Expedient. But then our ability to evolve and pick different pieces of technology as it changes, makes it so that you get continuous value along the way without having to rewrite your workflows and projects.
And I think the other thing that makes us special is all of the people that are involved, right? You can go out and buy all the software and buy all the tools. You don't have the hundreds of engineers that we have. You don't have outcome engineering folks who are helping you map out those business processes. This is the thing that we find a lot when we're talking with folks and they're saying, well, we bought all these servers and we're going to build this all ourselves. I'm like, okay, we'll see you in 6 months, because it's going to take you that long to get to a starting point. I call it the day 100 problem of, in my past, I've worked at places where just from the point of saying, yes, we're going to do this thing, to the point where I can actually start solving the problem is like 100 days between purchasing, shipping times, getting hardware in, cabling, racking, installing, just to the point where I can now start to solve the problem versus, hey, I'm going to deploy this and I'm going to get to the immediate value right now.
Pretty sure you just told my answer to the next question.
I mean, that's what makes us special. But Brian, as our CEO, I'm sure you see other reasons why we as Expedient are special.
Yeah. So the next question was, what is really the special sauce and how we compare against some of the competitors? So AJ's directly on point. The biggest thing is our people and the knowledge that we have, so that when you're implementing AI as an end user, if you're doing it yourself, it's probably the first time you've done it. And we have the ability to do it over and over for multiple different clients, so we get to that outcome significantly faster. And having that opinionated tech stack, you're not having to evaluate 30 different storage platforms or 20 different things of this or that. That we've done a lot of that curation to help get to a very repeatable outcome. And internally, I describe it that we're the box of Legos versus just the Legos. So there's a picture on the front, so you can see what the outcome is going to be. The instruction book's on the inside, so we know how to do it in a very, very consistent manner, versus if we just gave you the exact same Legos that we're using and you had to figure out how to put it all together, it's going to be a very different outcome. And then the other component is, as far as the differentiation, would be that technical optionality we talked about. So as things evolve, you can plug in different pieces of technology into your overall solution. And I think the final one I'd touch on here is the completeness of solution. That when we talk intelligent infrastructure, it is that we can have the physical data center, your cloud stack, and your AI all next to each other. But even in the AI side, we have the chat component, we have the security component, we have the data platforms, and we have the agentic workflow platforms. You're not buying 4 different or 5 different pieces of technology that you're trying to put together.
And I think kind of looking forward from there, if that's what makes us special, how do we take that special sauce and apply it to the future? How do we plan on expanding on the Secure Eye Gateway? Excellent. Do you plan on expanding the LLMs or adding additional functionality? I can tell you some things that are coming very, very soon that I'm very excited about already.
Brian, go off.
Go ahead.
Yeah. From the chat side, we already support multiple different models, and we have standard models. And if you have specific models that you want access to, we can do that. We have the ability to host private models for you. And some of the things that I really view as far as what's next is the depth and breadth of the portfolio of agents. And so we touched on a little bit during the first conversation, but I think of it a lot like a recipe book, that you have different chapters for appetizers versus desserts and so on. And that's very much such as chapters for different functions in the business, for the finance versus revenue versus HR and so on. So expanding those workflows so that you keep getting more efficiency and value in all the different silos of the business. So it's not just a technical thing that's being done, it's truly a business transformation component that's happening. And then I think the next thing in a lot of the industry is going to be small language models, so that Anthony made the comment that somebody was using a very large, expensive model to make a decision of yes or no, versus a model that doesn't even need a GPU. Those can be done on CPUs and normal processing, and having things that are more specialized. So some of the benefits of a service provider that people don't realize yet is very much the value of virtualization, of the ability to use fractional GPUs for models, so that you're only paying for the capacity you need, or having a private model, but having multiple people use a private model and have one instance that is accessing separate data, so you get economies of scale. So there's a lot of those same things that are going to be available to folks, that just changes the speed that they get to the outcome and also the total cost of ownership.
Yeah, I think the big piece there is that behind all of that, just like our special sauce is our people. It's folks like Anthony, it's folks like Tom Cooper, Brad Reynolds, who are all in our entire AI team, who are focused on this. They think about this all the time. They think about how to make things better, how to really solve these problems. in a way that is able to be scaled to as many folks as we can welcome onto our platform. That is not something that most organizations just have on deck. And that's kind of a like sneaky benefit that you get is you don't just get the platform today, you're getting people who are constantly thinking about how to make it better. There's plenty of things where like today it's great, but I want to make it greater. These are the things that we need to do to make it greater. That's what we focus on. That's that drive that we have. And we have one last question here, and I want to thank everybody who's stuck around for the extra few minutes here as we crest to the top of the hour. We're loving the focus as companies scale agentic workflows and high-value AI tasks on Expedient's infrastructure. How do we think about the supporting power and energy requirements to sustain that growth as customers keep building more and more intensive AI use cases?
Yeah, and that ties a little bit to what we talked about of the benefit of having the data center so that we can manage the power. Also, from some of the efficiency side, you're seeing massive changes in one generation of GPU to the next, or the ability for small language models to use CPU. So those are areas that you're getting magnitude of 10x, 15x difference from one generation of technology to the next. So that would be some of the benefit that you would get as well. But the efficiency, that's really our entire business. Our business is about extracting the efficiency of things so that if we were buying the same components that our clients purchased at the exact same price and delivering it the same way, there would just be no business there. So that is kind of our core business, is to drive efficiency and constantly think about what's next. So also the openness of the platform so that we can swap in and out different technologies is how we get to that long-term sustainability, so that you can have a platform that you're buying today that really enables you to go forward. And for clients that have things that are super AI intensive or GPU intensive, that's also where we give you the option to use either public models or private models. So that there's a crossover point when using public tokens is not as efficient as just buying infrastructure hosting. So that's back to the intelligent infrastructure, is the combination of the compute resources, so the cloud side, the data side in the middle, and the AI components. And you can flex across those to deliver your overall outcome.
And I think that's really where we've aimed, is just getting people to the outcome that they're looking for. And I think we have some more things to talk about soon. But with that, Brian, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Anthony for joining us during the interview. But join us next week, not next month. Next week, March 5th. March 3rd, I believe. We are working with Matt Schwark and Key Benefit Advisors. They sat down with us to tell their customer story of how we were able to help them get to the cloud that they were looking for. It took a little bit to get there, but it was really a really powerful story. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned and join us next week. Thanks, everybody.